Hello there, concept artists for IZTDM. As promised, this is the redo of the concept art overview video for characters and props. The previous one had a lot of errors in it, and I didn't like that, so I went ahead and redid it. This time I have completed concept art that does not have errors in it. They won't be interfering with me demonstrating what I'm expecting from concept art in this video. For starters, I'm going to go ahead and show you each individual section of the concept art, then I'll go into each of them individually and get more detail out of them. So, for right now, the main things that I'm going to talk about are, first of all, the character name and serial number. Second of all, the color chart. Third, the height chart. Fourth, the turnaround table. Fifth, variations of the character. Sixth, facial expressions. And last, any notes that may be required. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start with the name. Right here you can see I have given the serial number first and the character name last, and it's up at the top of the page so that everyone who's watching it can see in big bold letters what the art is about. I went ahead and penciled it in. It doesn't need to be any particular font as long as it's big and legible, and you, again, serial number first, character next. The next thing I want to talk about is coloring. When you do the colors, you're going to have to take inventory of every single color you use. That's very important. You can't leave a single one out, otherwise it's guesswork for the animators and colorists, and that's not very helpful. So go ahead and take inventory of every color you use. And when you do it, you're going to have to label them in a particular way. You're going to have to go ahead and include every part of the character that uses that color. For instance, right here, this particular shade of pink. I went ahead and said sleeve / eye shimmers / pack spots. That's because those three parts use the same color. I would prefer it if you reused as many colors as possible. Recycle colors as much as you can without making the character look bland. This saves on making the list overly complicated, and it makes life easier for animators and colorists. If you have to use different colors, of course, go ahead. But I'd prefer it if you went ahead and used the same color for many different parts. As many, of course, as is possible without making the character's design suffer from it. Next, I want to talk about the RGB scale. As I've noted here, the numbers in the parentheses denote what the color is on the RGB scale. So, for example, 50-0-30 would mean 150 red, 0 green, and 30 blue. Let me give you a more practical example. Here, we're back with the sleeve color. I have the color, then I have the label, then over here in parentheses I've written 255, 170, 170. That way colorists and animators know that to achieve this color they'll need 255 red, 170 green, and 170 blue. It's important you get the order right. If I were to mix up the colors, like if I accidentally put this here and this here, that would give me the very incorrect color. Also, something I want you to do, when you finish creating the color, go ahead and round the red, green, and blue to the nearest 5 or 10 spot. That just helps keep things simpler and more organized. Also, something that doesn't apply to every concept art, but if you're designing an Urchin, I have a specific way I want you to shade their eye shimmers. Right here we have the color for the eye shimmers. That would be this right here. What it looks like without any shadows on it. Right here, we have the color for their base eyes. Again, that'd be this part right here, the normal part of their eyes, the main part. Then how do we achieve the main thing for their eye shimmers? I have a specific thing I want you to do. I want you to take each of these color aspects, the red, the green, and the blue, and find a number exactly between this color and this color. For example, 255 minus 150 gives me a number. I divide it by 2 and then add it back into the smaller number, which is 150. That'll give me a number exactly between 255 and 150, and that gave me 205. That will be the red for in between. That will be the red for the shimmers whenever they're shaded. The same applies to 170 and 0. The number between those is 85. 170 and 30, the number right between those is 100. Again, this is all rounded to the nearest 5 or 10 after I find the number in between. When I find that color, I go ahead and use it for what the shimmers are whenever they're shaded. That's just for Urchins, though. That covers everything else for the color chart. Next, the height chart. Every time you make a height chart for the character, I want you to compare it to Zim. Get a picture of Zim, preferably one where he's standing still. Put him next to a 3/4 view of your character. Draw straight lines across the ground and across the top of Zim's head, not his antenna, his head, and draw where it comes up to on your character. That way we have a consistent lineup for the characters, and that way when all the character designs are done, I can line them all up, and then we'll have a consistent thing to base them off of. Next is the turnaround table. For the turnaround table, I'll give you the views that are necessary. Front, back, 3/4, profile. For most characters, here are the views that'll be necessary for the turnaround table. Front, 3/4, profile, and back. However, for Merp, there needed to be more. Why, you ask? Simple. Because she's not a symmetrical character. Look here at her waistline, right here, her robotic waist. You'll notice it looks different on this side than it does on this side because it's not symmetrical. That was important that I draw it from both sides. Right here, see that? That throws it for a loop. As does this front thing right here. It's not symmetrical. That's why I needed 2 different views. Some characters will require more than the standard 4 views. Some characters will require less. It all depends on what each character needs. And I'll give you the specifics on what character needs when I assign you to design a character. Also, real quick, when you're designing Irkins, again, this is an Irkin thing, with the shimmers, they always point towards the light source, and the bigger shimmer is always the one closest to the light source. The littler shimmer is further away, and on the opposite side of the eye. And they never change shape, but they do change shape, but they never match the eye's shape. They always squish and stretch to fit. For example, right here, where she's scowling, you can see that how the ovals shrunk up and stretched to match the eye shape. They didn't take on the form of the eye. They didn't suddenly become sharp triangles or anything, but they did change shimmer shapes to match the eye. Another thing you need to do for the turnaround table is these lines here that denote where the specific points are on the character. In the description, I have a link to Draw with Jazza. He's an awesome YouTuber, and he's posted a tutorial on turnaround tables. Those are very handy. I highly recommend you check out that video for very detailed overview of turnaround tables and what I expect out of them. These lines basically denote where specific things fall on the character. For instance, the bottom of her waist, the middle of her neck, the top of her head. The more important features are thicker lines, the less important features are thinner lines. And Merp's is overly detailed because I wanted to do as an example that covered all my bases. But for your concept art, you just use your best judgment and decide for yourself what needs to be done. The only thing I'll specifically definitely require are the top of the head, the bottom of the head, and the bottom of the body, and the ground, of course. That's that for the turnaround table. Keep it consistent, by the way. You'll notice Merp's eyes line up in all of this. They're all at the same height. Oops. That was very important to do. So, again, make sure it's consistent and lined up. I think Smoots doesn't have hers lined up, but I did that myself intentionally, and I noted that. And that's the exception to the rule. What the Smoots concept art, if you look in the description, you can find a link to another mostly done concept art, which is Smoots's. That's the exception to the rule where her eyes aren't the same length and height. That's not the rule, that's the exception. Okay, variations on the same character. Oh, wait, one more thing I forgot almost. You'll notice that the 3/4 view is the only view that's shaded in the turnaround table. That's important because it helps keep the animators focused, and it helps them know what needs to be shaded and what isn't, and what is part of her design and what isn't. So only shade the 3/4 view and the variations. Everything else, flats. Okay, now that we've talked about that, variations. That would be like if a character gets beat up, as Merp has here, or if a character finds themselves wearing different clothes, or if they're, I don't know, if suddenly they have paint dumped on them. That would be different variations of the character. And when I assign you to a character, I'll tell you what views I need for those variations and what I'm looking for in the variations. Just keep it consistent, and again, you'll need to shade those. And there might be as many as I think Zim is the one who has the most. He has like 5 or 10 variations, somewhere in that neighborhood. Smoots has a few less, and Merp here has a very small number. She has the minimum number of variations, which is just one, where she's beat up right here. Expressions. These you'll only need to draw the head. You don't need to draw the full body for the expression, unless it's essential to the character. Some characters do need that, but the rule is you don't need that. Unless I explicitly tell you otherwise when I'm assigning you the character, you just need to draw the head. And I will just give you the expressions that are necessary. For the expressions, draw an unshaded 3/4 view of the character. You see here all the heads are facing at a 3/4 view and none of them are shaded. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about are notes. That is literally everything under the sun that you can think of that'll help animators and storyboard artists draw the character consistently. And that can literally be placed anywhere on the thing. You see right here, you don't need to label the height lines, but I went ahead and did that to show that even those can be labeled if you feel it's necessary for notes. Or right here, Zim comes up to the bottom of her upper eyelash. I kind of denote that to help storyboard artists and concept artists and animators know what to do there. Or here, Merp is somewhat pudgy for an Urkin. Keep that in mind when drawing her. She's not fat like Sizzlor, of course, but you'll notice that she's a tad bit more bulky than other Urkins. However, her arms are still little twigs. Also, her head could be considered kind of fat. That's an example of a note. Another example of a note I drew up here was I made cruddy little drawings just enough to get my ideas across. You don't need to be very intricate with the notes, just enough to get the idea across. A note regarding her legs. They never bend up initially, they always bend down at first. So, right way and the wrong way. Right here, another good example of a note. You may have noticed that the upper set of eyelashes, not the lower set, switch sometimes. Sometimes the thicker eyelash is up top, sometimes it's down below. Truthfully, it really doesn't matter, so long as it looks good. The only stipulation, of course, is that you cannot change it in the middle of a shot. That would look weird. Once you settle on something for the shot, use it. What I was talking about was here. You'll see that here, her big eye on the top pair of eyelashes, the bigger one is on bottom and the littler one is on top. Yet over here, the bigger one's on top and the littler, not there, there. You'll see it switches, like here, the big one's on top, the little one's on bottom. And it's actually different across the thing right here. Like I said, whatever looks pleasing for a shot is okay. And then I give examples of what to do, what not to do, what's too skinny, what's too fat, and everything. So really, notes cover everything you think needs to be clarified or anything you really think could easily be missed. Like here, note when she's beat up, note the missing antenna tip on the right side, and the left eye is swollen underneath. So what I'm saying is when you draw her beat up, pay close attention to the blood splatter locations and shapes, the bruise locations, and how her swollen eye is shaped. It has to be consistent between scenes and shots. This even includes the way her left eye's shimmer is warped as a result of the swelling. See that? So that's everything for the concept art for characters, and if you want to include your signature, you're free to do that. Just do it in an unobtrusive location in the bottom right corner of the sheet, or top right, or top left, or bottom left, whatever's a corner and out of the way. And as for that, that's it. You don't, if you have any other questions, you're going to have to ask me on a case-by-case basis. Some characters will need special things done to them, but for the most part, this is a pretty standard character sheet. So, okay, I'm glad you listened to this. Hope this video was helpful, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Goodbye.